All right. We are live. We're here for Beard Banter episode 8. And I actually have the distinct pleasure of an OG, Bryson, who runs the cyber research unit at ConnectWise and formerly Perch, and is a genius with a purple beard that makes me envious. So, if you're joining in, please make comments in the chat. We'll bring them on the screen here. We'll have some conversations about it. But today, I brought Bryson in because we have a nomenclature problem in our industry, right? Like we have a real issue with what's an EDR, AV, SIEM. How does this SOC as a service function? What do we? And Bryson, when we were chatting a couple weeks ago about setting up this show, he was right in the middle of this, kind of existential argument with a partner, saying, "Well, I've got a SIEM now. I don't need EDR, or I don't need my Sentinel-1, or I don't." Whatever it might be. And so we figured it might be helpful for us to kind of dispel some of those. So Bryson, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and then we'll really get started.
All right. I'm Bryson. I'm like Matt said, I work for the CRU. That's a cyber research unit at ConnectWise. Before ConnectWise, I was with Perch, and we call ourselves Perch Labs. We were doing research and that sort of thing. I've been in IT since the late '90s. I started working on Y2K stuff and that sort of thing. I've been doing security stuff for at least 10 years or so. I reached that point a few years ago where I realized that my career is old enough to drink.
Thanks for waiting until I had my mouth full of water.
Yeah,
that's funny.
and at Perch, I came to the realization I was the oldest guy in the SOC. Which was kind of a new experience for me. I mean, it was a small SOC. There was like 10 people, but I don't know. I always thought Patrick was older than me, but no.
No. Yeah. Similar conversation. So one of the guys I do a lot of streaming with is Dom Kirby. Brilliant, a lot of good background, great practical, pragmatic security advice. And he's like 14 years younger than me. Like, I'm like, holy Jesus, I'm ancient now. Like, This is ridiculous. Like, anyways, yeah, I had a similar moment not too long ago. So one of the first ones, let's talk about this. Like, what is the difference between antivirus and an EDR? So we talk about Sentinel-1, it's an EDR, Cybereason, CrowdStrike, like there's tons of them. But what's the difference between antivirus and an EDR? Help me understand that conversation.
Okay.
It's me. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was cold in my basement this morning.
Well, I mean, it's mostly marketing. It's how depends on who you buy it from, what they want to call it, but essentially it comes down to how it works, what it's looking for. So antivirus started off pretty much just strictly looking for signatures. We're looking for file hashes and we're looking for certain strings inside of a file, that sort of thing. And then eventually it became a little more advanced, and they started adding, heuristics, looking at behaviors, but that was secondary. EDR kind of flips that. You're looking at heuristics first of all, or at least it should be, and then looking maybe at signatures, file names, hashes, stuff like that. But then it also, tries to give you some extra things you can do. It actually lets you examine what's going on a bit more. I mean, you mentioned Sentinel-1, but with Sentinel-1, you can actually go through and like look at processes and get a bigger picture of what happened rather than just file A match signature A.
Yeah, and you hit the point, right? Like, it's all about the amount of data flow, right? Like, if you look at AV comes in with, here's the bad stuff. Anything else is probably good. We don't need to record much. We're just talking about the bad stuff and the good stuff. Then you get into EDR as its first nascence kind of happens, and they're looking at heuristics first. There may be a little more machine learning involved, and you're looking at patterns and behaviors as opposed to necessarily just hashes, just like a fingerprint. Anybody that's watching this that has questions on what a hash is, like a hash is just a math problem you apply to everything the same way. And the outcome that comes out of that math problem is much, much shorter than the entire file you're looking at, right? It's only this long. And now that file will always come out to this in that math problem. Meaning if you have that, it's like a fingerprint, and it's a very transmissible fingerprint that I can hand to Bryson, and he goes, yeah, I can look for that hash in my files, right? So when you look at that, storing just that hash information is more data flow because you're having to get it, store it, place it somewhere where it's readable, apply heuristics to it in some way, look at it that way. But you take that hash, and now when you start to talk about EDR, as you were saying, Bryson, it's looking for those heuristics. It's doing the things we talk about. It's looking at the bad lists as well, right? They have signatures, no doubt. But in addition, it's grabbing stuff and storing it so that you can look back in history when you find something that was not known 2 days ago, right? A new 0 day, a new indicator of compromise, a new type of attack, and you can go hunt back a little bit, right? I used to call it poor man's SIM, but
yeah. And if another thing about what you were saying there about hashes is they're very ephemeral. They don't last very long. They're very easy to change. If for your common hashing algorithms, you change a single bit in the file, it doesn't just move the hash up to the next value, but it's a completely different hash.
Yep.
If you've looked at when you talk about threat intelligence, you look at the pyramid of pain. And hashes are at the very bottom. They're the easiest things to get, but knowing the hash has the least impact on the threat actor because it's so easy for them to change that. And you've got threat actors out there that they add some padding, or they pack
couple
the
bits on
file
the
or
end, a
compress
couple
it.
bits on the bottom. Yeah,
exactly. And they recompile it every time, so every single version of that file has a different hash, matches different signatures. It's very easy for them to change those things, and so they're not really great for detection.
Right, and that is why traditional AV died. Right, that is the reason that I don't remember who it was, Symantec CEO or someone stood up on a stage and was like, "Listen, traditional AV is dead."
Yeah.
And the reason is I can with zero cost, literally zero cost, go use open tools to rehash something, to cause it to be a new hash, right? PowerShell obfuscation scripts. There's just so much to make it easy, even for a baby script kiddie like me, to rehash something. So, yeah, hashes were the old ways.
We saw an example recently. It was Mimikatz on a system, and the AV detected it, but you just changed the file name and it wouldn't detect it anymore. It was even
that was
the same
Defender,
hash.
if I recall, that had a similar problem with that. Where
okay.
If you named a file that, it was fine. You could run Mimikatz all day long by just naming it this particular file. It was fantastic. Yeah. But when you get into EDR, and the reason this came up was we talked about, and I think we just wanted to lead the crowd through what is EDR, what is AV, what are those doing, and you see the shift towards EDR being able to collect some telemetry. Right, it's going to collect a process, what was running, what process called what process. That's more than just a hash. That's a lot more data to have to either grab an egress, compress an egress, do your work on the data there in some form or fashion in the local compute. But it's kind of the beginnings of a SIEM. And I think when you start talking about a SIEM, you're now talking about trying to take multiple data sets, all from different places in this ecosystem, right? So you might have your EDR data, which comes from your EDR agent, right? You put that in your SIEM. But you have to make those data sets normalized, right? When I bring in the firewall logs, the local machine information, the cloud activity logs, the all the different things, the vulnerability management systems, those things all go into a SIEM. And when that goes into a SIEM, which is kind of the basis of what you guys have always done, right, Bryson? That was your world, right? You can now hunt and say, I know with this particular threat actor, I will see a firewall reach out of this. I will see a file hash of this, a process of this. Well, guess what? You just talked about firewall logs and EDR logs both needing to be correlated in order to make some real diagnostic of, did this actually happen? Yeah. And so that would be my cheap way of explaining what the difference between a SIEM is, that it now brings multiple data sets and tries to bring them to a normalized value so that Bryson's computer is always associated with Bryson's identity. It's associated with Bryson's external life. Those things become connected in a way, if that makes sense, so that they're meaningful.
Yeah, that's being able to take a single data point and pivoting on it and getting the bigger picture. So SIEM will let you do that. You can visualize it. Most SIEMs will come with visualization tools, so you can kind of visualize what's happening. But obviously, ideally, you want all the logs from all the devices from every source coming into the SIEM. All the things. That was what Aaron at Perch was always saying. We want all of your data. Of course, that's not easy to do. It's not easy to get all the data because everybody's logging in different ways. Some
it doesn't
applications
scale.
Don't log at all. Don't always scale. All those things. But yeah, you get all the data in one place. Then you can see, check your email logs, and you can see that there's some suspicious email coming in, and then it goes to a specific user's mailbox. Office 365 may flag something, and you see those logs. You can see that the user opened a file, and you can see in the execution, like if you've got syspon, you'll see the actual WinWord.exe running, and then it spawns PowerShell,
which is
then
always a good thing. Word spawning
you always
PowerShell is
want
never
Word.
bad.
Yeah, obviously, Word always should run PowerShell. And then you see it calling back to an IP address, and then you can see some file being downloaded, and there's a new exe that starts accessing LSAS memory. So it's probably Mimikatz. I mean, all those things, you can tie those together in a SIEM because you've got all that data in one place, and you get a much bigger picture of what happened. It makes it, it also helps like from forensic side if you're dealing in IR.
You have
We use
corroboration. You can rule out what
Elastic
wasn't touched. Yeah.
to kind of host our stuff, but I've worked with IR teams when we're working with customers who've had some kind of breach, and basically what they want to do is get all the data, and then they import it into their own Elastic, and they're using that for doing their forensics and figuring out what happened in the incident response side of things.
If I was to draw like a mental picture there, right? Like, and I may be better off drawing it than trying to word it, but let's just assume you're playing Carmen Sandiego, right? And you've got all the little dots that connect and eventually lead you to where Carmen is. Like, let's just say that's the
Man,
way
you really are dating yourself here.
I might be. Yeah. But I see it like it was yesterday. So I think that's just part of the age
yeah. No, I played it too.
But you have all the dots. But let's say that dot number 1 came from your firewall log. Dot number 2 came from your email system. Dot number 3 came from the EDR, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, right? So it came in, you opened a file. That means the file hash came into the EDR. You saw that spawning a new process from PowerShell. That's all still EDR. And now you zoom over to the next set of dots, and those are in the firewall logs because it reached out and grabbed these things. And those are in the command and control side of that from an application layer in the cloud logs. Now imagine you have that little magnifying glass, and you can only look at one at a time. Right? You can only choose to look at one set of dots. Is it going to be the firewall logs? Well, now all I'm going to see is this file got pulled in. I'm not going to have any context around it. I'm not going to have anything that happened before that. I'm not going to have seen the PowerShell. I'm not going to have seen the WinWord attachment. I'm not going to have seen. But if I take that magnifying glass and move it over, now all I'm seeing is the EDR logs that say that something launched, that I saw a WinWord come up, that I saw Outlook do that launch from an Outlook. I can make some correlation, but I don't have the same context that says, I saw the Office 365 logs. Here's the hash. Here's what came in. Here's the targeted stuff. I saw, right? And so I think the point is that you're making is you now can look at the whole kind of picture instead of individual pieces of the picture and trying to make correlations in your brain that we're not great at as humans, right? We don't correlate large data sets very well in our heads. Some might, but not many.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so and the reason I think this triggered you so much when we were talking about it is like it shows a lack of the understanding nomenclaturally of what all pieces of delivering effective security are part of it. And it's because we have a lower maturity consumer in general. They're starting to get smarter. A lot of the MSPs I'm talking to have blown my mind in the last 3 months. Especially compared to a year ago. Yeah. And maybe we touch on that a minute, right? Let's talk about that. Would you say the MSPs are maturing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of the communities that have built up around MSPs have really been focused on security. They've been working together, educating each other. It's been really encouraging for me, getting into this community and seeing how everybody's just kind of working together, and it's actually pretty cool. Seeing what they're doing. But yeah, I definitely seen a lot more mature processes, a lot better understanding of what security is.
Harder questions for you, which is a good thing,
harder
right?
questions, exactly. We just came back from Write a Boom in Orlando.
Cool.
It was great, and that was some top quality like RSA conference level content. And yeah, there were some people who maybe had some questions about we're not that mature yet, and what do we do? But there were also a lot of people who were at that level, and we're deploying some of the solutions. They were using the cyber defense matrix. They'd already
seeing like a flow of maturity, but they were all at least asking the questions now. I think that was for me. Write a Boom was, and I don't like to be like overly gracious about these things because it gets a little old, but I really was excited by that conference. Like I really thought it was so well laid into educational only. Yeah, I might work for Blackpoint. Yes, I might work for ConnectWise. Yes, I might work, but I'm here to educate you on just the stuff, the things. And I think one of the best things that happened for me out of that conference was this one gentleman, and I'll protect the innocent by not naming names, but he came in and said, you know what, I'm done being in security. I'm done being in technology. what do you mean? He said, there's no way I can deliver all of these things. And I think for me, what was cool about it was watching that realization of stepping into high school football or anything you've ever, experienced that was hard, whatever it may be from a competition perspective, and going, man, I thought I knew this, but holy hell, it was this wide, right? It was a million more things than I thought. I didn't know I had to have effective asset management and effective SOC and SIEM and the ability to bring in EDR data to ensure that it's always on and they're under compliance. We need baselines and I need the understanding of my operational like that mind setting in was so cool to watch this guy kind of go through that. And then he sent me an email Monday and said, hey, listen, you talked me off a ledge, Matt. He said, your answer of glad you're seeing all this. It's not time to quit. It means you're ahead of the game, right? It means that you're absolutely starting to realize I need to write down where I suck. I need to write down the things I'm missing here. I need to have the conversations with my clients. I need to have the conversations about right pricing. I need to have but you actually see a plan now. You know the spaces you have giant gaps in, right? And as you start to have more and more understanding, you start to be able to see these larger things that need to happen, these larger overarching projects that you need to be able to deliver, from a security perspective. I got to touch on some of these comments real quick. Okay. Hold on. So Ashley, my friend, says, is that a lookalike or is it the real thing? You should check and see if he's wearing purple underpants with another man's name on them to be sure. Well, Ashley, honestly, Bryson and I were separated at birth. We're just a state apart. Like we think we may have been in the same hospital and we kind of got pulled apart, but yeah. And then Kyle's busting on my nomenclature. Like, I think it's fair use of it. I don't think I messed up there. And my friend Harry also popped in and said, hey, listen, I hope everything's going well. It is. We're out fighting the good fight, Harry. So good to see you, my friend. Anyway, sorry, Bryson, I cut you off. We're talking about the conference.
Well, just thinking about that, where MSPs are now, I was just thinking 20 years ago, I worked for a IT firm and now firm, meaning there were two of us. So it was pretty small in Joplin, Missouri. So not a big town. But we would install AV and put a firewall up, and that was security. That was pretty much it. And if we look now at the risks are greater. They're more sophisticated than they were back then.
The intent has changed for sure.
The intent's changed. Yeah, and we were dealing with small organizations, but most of our customers were small businesses of maybe 10 employees tops. Right. We did a few we had like one big law office, maybe big for Joplin. So it had maybe 20 employees. So it was all pretty small scale stuff, but still that law office, we had some small like financial institutions that we worked with that were, but they're still, they are at risk now. If they get compromised, they get ransomed, they get data stolen. That's a huge problem for them. And if we're still thinking like we were 20 years ago, we just install an AV and a firewall, then they're screwed. And their business is over. So MSPs kind of are the key to, taking them to the next level, because a company of 10 employees, they can't hire maybe they can hire a full-time security guy, or IT person, but most likely not.
Yeah, true.
And even then, that person's not going to be able to really handle the full load of security and everything else and really protect them. So it is really cool to see how MSPs are maturing and they're kind of filling in those gaps. So all of these small businesses out there that just can't really provide that level of maturity in their security space, but actually have the real risks to them, that they now have somebody they can go to that can take care of it for them.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, you hit on a pretty good point there, right? So MSPs, and I was the same guy, right? 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when I started as an MSP, we only picked the things we wanted to manage just because if we used the same firewall, if we used the same antivirus, if we used the same, it was a scale conversation. Like I didn't even really understand how much of a security conversation it really was at the time. Like if I'm pointing fingers at myself as well. And as you think about it, the challenge is that the threat definitely has changed. The intent has definitely changed. I was on a call with the ethical hacker guy earlier today, and his statement was, listen, like when I was playing around with this, it was to get my name in the paper. It was to be known as a hacker. It was like the intent was very delineated, right? It was really not in the same way. Now it's all financial or espionage, right? Like it's 100% financial or espionage or some combination of both at this point. And so when you start looking at it that way, the threat has changed. It's not just a firewall and endpoint protection anymore. It's good practices, it's good baselines, it's good coding, it's good advice, it's partnering with good partners, it's having good skill set capabilities that you can't meet yourself. Like there's so much growing and the threat's growing, but the general SMB owner, the general business owner walking around is no more educated to that delineation than they were 10 years ago. I really firmly believe
absolutely.
that. Yeah. And so not only do MSPs have this maturation challenge to meet the need, their clients already think they're meeting the need. The marketing histrionics, if I install Sentinel-1, I'm good. While it might be a great product and it might serve a very good need, it's no more than saying, well, the surgeon has a scalpel on the table. We need to check to see if they're a good surgeon. No. You probably want the efficacy to be valuable there too, right? Like, so they have this challenge of trying to educate a client and grow their skills at the same time. When, for a long time, I had to add $2 a SKU, $5 a SKU. Every time something new would come out, you need dark web management, I'm going to add that on. We need to add in, an EDR, it's going to be another $3. I need to add in for a long time, I was just skewing them to death. And it really took this overall understanding of us getting to some level of maturity, some level of this is what I'm going to deal with. And guess what else? Some level of accepted risk. Right? I think to your point, if you've got 10 user environment and you have some degree of risk of exposure, the risk of that is protecting less dollars. And at some point you might just have to say, nope, I'm probably not going to add a SIM into this because I can't afford it. And I'm just gonna have to accept that risk. The difference will be these people will be actually accepting risk. Right now they think that you handle it.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's one of the nuances, but I've taken us off on a tangent here other than the Marty McFly stuff.
It's a good tangent.
But to your point, walking around both right of boom, and I think I also really started seeing this even in Secure, IT Nation and Secure last year, right? You have MSPs starting to go, okay, I need someone to tell me what this security thing is. And I think the big challenge is they genuinely expected it to just be another product. They genuinely expected it to just be, hey, you hire a SOC, you're done. No. If you didn't turn off the MFA in the first place, we wouldn't have this person getting pwned and us having to have the SOC be involved in this conversation. Otherwise, air gap. True story. That doesn't always work though either, Kyle. Like fantastic malware methodologies existed for air gapping. Like you look back at Stuxnet and Flame. If you look at the hard drive flash of an LED light through a window from 2 miles away with a camera egression of at 512K or something, like it's wild. But yeah, I know the tongue in cheek side.
RFC 2549, IP over avian carrier.
I have not seen that one. That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's one of those April 1st RFCs. MIT actually implemented it like 20 years ago. They I'm going to go off another tangent, but
no, this is great.
If we're talking about air gap networks, so they issued a ping command and they converted the packet to hexadecimal, printed it up, attached it to a carrier pigeon, and sent it. It flew to the other destination. They would then read it in via OCR and then read it into a ping. I think one of the pigeons got killed by a hawk.
That's so good. There were actually delivery failures. Did they have a handshake?
Yes, yeah. There were some delivery. No. It was just a ping.
So it's a UDP ping. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a one way. I don't even think they did a reply. Obviously, there was huge latency, and not all the packets made it. So there was a few issues. You might still be able to find the white paper they put together. This was
so good.
Mid 2000s, I think, when this came out, something like that. Actually, it may have been the 90s. I don't know. It's been a long time. But yeah, RFC 2549 IP over avian carrier. That'd be a nice project for us to try sometime.
Oh, I'm totally reading this and buying carrier pigeons. Like this is fantastic.
Yeah, if you want to really just kind of go down the rabbit hole, just look up all the April 1st RFCs. It's not every year, but there's like there's mood, like packet moods, and then there's like there's a wireless protocol for scenic routing. And it has to do with the packet mood. If the packet's depressed, then it wants to get a little fresh air, so you route it over the Wi-Fi.
Oh, that's good. That's so good. Yeah. I love our comment here. Brutal packet loss. Yeah, definitely. Especially if you need all parts of that packet, right? You're going to get PI and then a G from your carriers. So we want somebody pig. Like I don't understand this. Oh, that's great.
My favorite is there's a draft RFC for IP over burrito.
I'm searching for that draft RFC. So if anybody's not familiar, RFC is request for comment. Like a lot of the architecture and world we live on that has been invented through RFCs, right? Like us all coming together and going, all right, how the hell are we going to deliver an IP packet? All right, how are we
Yeah,
going to deliver? Like, yeah,
yeah, it's how the protocols are defined. It's sort of the official, like it's the reason why you can buy a network card from one vendor and it can speak to another vendor, because they've all decided on specific protocols that they all support, and the RFCs are sort of the
what
standards
makes
that
it?
have been
Yeah.
agreed upon on how things work.
Well, and what I love it though, it is request for comment. Like it literally started on these news groups of people saying, I'm defining this as a protocol. This is your opportunity to speak. Because it would have been like 19 people that would have had a vote in those days, right? Like it would have
Yeah,
been, just asking 9 people on this user group
yeah.
over a DARPA net, like essentially, to then say, all right, what are we going to do about putting packets together? Can we all agree on like these 7 layers, and then we'll like put, yeah. And I guess I would have been at that time 5 layers back then, but
So yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, but yeah, XDR. So
yeah, let's get on to XDR. Help people
yeah,
understand. We've got EDR. What is
right.
XDR then? Endpoint detection and response. X, I'm assuming, is a variable, meaning anything DR.
It's extended detection and response, I think, is the
Okay.
general terminology there. But yeah, I think it's kind of like EDR, where it kind of depends on the marketing and who you're asking. But XDR is it's a bit broader. It's looking more at the network and the enterprise. So like bringing SIEM and EDR together would kind of be XDR. Um,
Okay.
that's kind of what we're getting at. It's EDR is endpoint. It's just focused on that. XDR, we're extending it beyond. We're looking at the network. We're looking at the enterprise, and exactly what that means, it depends on the vendor. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you take EDR, you take SIEM, you take you start looking at mobile devices, all those things together.
Well, and you start
That's
extending SIM
where,
and what it's covering, right? Like, and
yeah,
one of the
you
things that's,
implement SOAR and get
yeah.
more advanced kind of responses and things that you can do with it.
Yep. Well, and here's what's happening. Like if we close our eyes and fast forward on the technology clock, like we just moved forward 15 years or something, like you would have less variables, right? Today you have server 2008, 8R2, 12, 12R2, 16, 19, 20 different iterations, AD forest function level, right? You have hundreds and thousands of these variables. What hardware is it running on? What hypervisor platform? Is it possible the hypervisor platform's compromised? Are we, like, you start getting all that. But if you imagine a world that only started with, I'm going to buy all commercial things such as Azure Active Directory or Okta as my underlying ID provider. I'm going to only use SaaS applications. I'm going to only bind my machines directly to Intune. I'm not going to have these other supply chain risks. I'm not. Then you could see a world where SOAR, XDR, and SIEM allow for automation that's really meaningful because you have the same variables coming in. You have the same way the data is patterned. You don't have hundreds of different log types and variations of those things. You get down to a very normalized set of data already. And I think if you took SIM and this concept, and these are all marketing terms, guys and girls, like, let me not lie to you. Like I might screw up the way one company sees it, the way another company sees it. But when you really get at it, if we got to a world where the endpoint detected the WIN word running and they're able to correlate that all the way back to the identity and to every other SaaS application that was touched and everything, and tells a very complete picture, and it tells that very complete picture with the same variables, the same Lego blocks, right? I got the 2 block, I got the 4 blocker, I got the 9 blocker. I guess, are there 9 blockers? There's not a 9 blocker. There's an 8 blocker, right? Whatever it may be. And you start seeing a world where we could actually have very effective. Bryson finds something, and it is so unilaterally the same way I'll detect it on everything. And it's unilaterally the same way we'll protect against it on everything. Like that is kind of where I think we're heading in this. And we've just come up with names through the iterations of what we're capable of doing over time. Like, being a little pragmatist, but
Yeah, if we want to get really effective and in detecting bad things that happens, again, if I go back to the pyramid of pain, the very top of that pyramid are TTPs. Are you familiar with the pyramid of pain, or am I just
I'm
starting
not. No,
something?
I'm totally putting
Okay.
this on my lookup queue here. Yeah,
Yeah. I forget. Hold on. There's a person
I'm gonna pull it
associated with
up. I'll
it.
be able to share here. So
Sands talks about it. David Bianco's pyramid of pain. So yeah, I don't know if you can pull up an image and kind of share it.
I will. Yeah.
When you're talking about threat intel, this is a big part of it, but it's not just about intelligence and the type of intelligence you gather, but what you do with it and how it actually impacts threat actors. So the very bottom of it is hash values, because hash values are, they're easy to find, but they're also easy to change. And knowing the hash values and blocking them don't have a lot of impact for threat actors. The next one up is IP addresses and then domain names. So again, if we're talking about like indicators of compromise, and when you look at threat intelligence reports, these are the things a lot of them start off with: hashes, IP addresses, domain names. IP addresses and domain names, those are things that are also very easy to change. And when we're talking about threat intelligence, these are pretty ephemeral as well. They're maybe really only good intelligence for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah. Especially if you start counting in like TLS 1.3, being able to hide your C-squareds and like all kinds of crazy stuff to make this fast and change.
Then we get to like the network and host artifacts, which is, really getting to more of the EDR and SIEM capabilities, looking at that flow traffic, looking at specific logs that are generated. We can look at the tools that they're using, and then the very top are TTPs. So this is something that they talk a lot about with MITRE. Are you familiar with MITRE ATT&CK?
Yeah,
you guys seen that whole framework. So it's looking at actually what are the bad guys actually doing, what are their tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Yeah, the summation of all of those fingerprints, right? Like
and if we kind of, from what you were talking about, I think ideally our detection should just be focused on TTPs. So we're not focusing on specific domain names, specific log artifacts. We're looking at, okay, what are the actual techniques that are being deployed? And if we can get to a point where we've got a real common nomenclature, we can got standards in place, and we're kind of abstracting away a lot of the details, then we can just look at those TTPs and we can be much more effective. And
they'll look the same everywhere. They'll look the same in collection. Exactly. They'll look the same in practice. Yeah.
Yeah. There's maybe 100 different ways to implement a specific technique, but if you know that that's the technique that they're going after, if you know what their tactics are, and if you can detect or even block based on that. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I think that was kind of the gold standard. That's where we want to get, where we can abstract away all those tiny little details and actually get to where we're focusing on what is their end game, what is their goal. The tactics are actually their objectives. So what are they after? If we can get to where we can detect those things and even block those, and then that's really going to be a big game changer. And so maybe that's where
the other side. Well, and I think that's the other side of this, is that once you have the detection normalized and you're scraping away a lot of those artifacts that are useless, and because they're all the same, right? They're all the same data sets. But once you have that, the response is normalized, right? In the same breath, right? So back to your point, I think you could see a much higher automation of, I've distilled, this is definitely the technique. This is definitely the tactic. They're after this asset. This is the practice being used. There's no other good common uses of this in the normalized data set at this point. We're going to block this endemically, right? We're going to block this systemically from our assets. And it is kind of what you're already doing, right? Like in your world, that's literally what you're doing. You're making, if it looks like this pattern and it has these things and they're these, and you're kind of back in that artifacts world, right? You're kind of in the annoying and challenging tactic side of this, but you're actually trying to just represent the top piece, the TTPs. You're trying to come out with pieces that represent that upper level. This is really good. I have not seen this. But I think it's, I love analogies, and this is a pyramid's tried and true, right? We've got OSI models, we've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like we got a lot of pyramids in our exemplary space.
Yeah, so. We love pyramids.
This has been great. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I try to keep these to about 30 minutes, and we're just a little over it. So any closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave the three people watching this with, at this point? I'm teasing. It's probably considerably more than that.
But well, I guess, when I do my streams, I always end with 3 recommendations whenever you're, working on things and you get stuck. Don't panic, try harder, and always RTFM.
Yeah, definitely RTFM, which is not your red team field manual. It's the other abbreviation of said.
Read the freaking
blanking manual. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the point, right? Now that you're aware of your risk, and I'll just build off Bryson's point, now that you understand how much more goes into delivering security, now that you understand how much more needs to be learned, I like to tell people there's 3 buckets, right? There's what you know that. There's what you don't know. You can contextualize from that. You know how you don't know it. You have an anchoring point of what told you didn't know something. And then what you don't know, That's often the one that punches you in the face. But I think the challenge is you're seeing MSPs realize how much was in the don't know you don't know bucket, and it's now moved into the don't know bucket, right? And they're going, oh my God,
Yeah.
there's so much to learn. And so to build on your point, don't be afraid of failure. Just be improving. Always get better. Try to document where you went from A to B to C to D and ultimately continue improving. And I think that'll meet what we have to meet today. You're not going to win against the threat actors, but your job isn't to win against the threat actors. Your job is to be defensible in how you chose to try to win against the threat actors. And I think that that's the point I'll leave you with is just constantly improve. Constantly try to figure out how you're not good enough. At least that's been my life ethos. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Bryson.
Oh, thank you,
You've
Matt.
been one of my heroes from very early on in this journey of being in cybersecurity. So to be able to spend some time chatting with you makes me so very happy. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for watching.